Good morning and Happy New Year. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe has the morning off. Right now on Morning News Now, back to reality. An unfortunate truth on this Monday morning. Another holiday season is in the books, and that means many Americans are now forced to deal with an airport wake-up call as they head back home. Hundreds of delays and cancellations are plaguing runways from coast to coast as wicked winter weather slams tarmacs up and down the eastern seaboard as the sun rises, and hundreds of TSA agents remain off the job because of COVID. But there is a silver lining to this New Year's nightmare. We'll tell you how you can keep your trip home turbulence-free from gate to garage. Making the grade, yet another COVID test for the nation's school systems as millions of kids head back to class this morning, faced with a mixed response from states on how exactly to educate with record positivity rates. Will remote learning make a comeback this winter? We'll take you across the country. Also this morning, leave it on the field. We got a different kind of highlight reel from this weekend's NFL matchups. Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Antonio Brown making a splash online for a dramatic game exit from yesterday's meeting with the Jets. Now the Bucs head coach says he's off the squad. Could Brown still have a future in the NFL? Plus, on this first Monday of 2020, we remember an American icon, Betty White, a Hollywood mainstay for well over a half century, who graced television sets on sitcoms and studio game shows alike, passed away at age 99, just days shy of her 100th birthday. Take a look back at her wide-ranging career and all things that made White gold. We begin this hour, though, with the latest on those travel headaches people across the country are dealing with. Thousands of flights have already been canceled this morning as winter weather and COVID callouts leave airports and airlines struggling to catch up. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has the latest.
Yeah, good morning. We've got heavy snow hitting the D.C. area, expecting 7, 8, 9 inches of snow today. Already system-wide, 1,700 flights canceled today, 600 delays already. The hardest hit airports, Reagan National is up top. Dulles is on the list. LaGuardia is on the list. Denver. And we're also seeing Chicago O'Hare and Chicago Midway. And we are just getting started. The hope this morning that today is a day of recovery and rebound for airlines and stranded passengers after a week of mass cancellations. But instead, another challenging day is shaping up. Even more delays and more cancellations, with January storms and the rampant spread of the Omicron variant proving too much for airlines and airports.
They already pushed my flight back twice, so I might miss my connection.
Nearly 1,800 TSA officers off the job with COVID. On Sunday, FlightAware showing 2,700 canceled flights, more than 9,000 delays, all part of more than 12,000 cancellations over the last week. Among the airports hardest hit, Denver, Chicago O'Hare, and Atlanta.
It's usually a well-oiled machine here, and it runs very smoothly. Today, it just isn't that way.
Jen Fabian and her dad came to Florida for the Gator Bowl, but the weekend took a turn when Delta canceled their flight home. After more delays caused them to miss a connection, they finally made it back home 22 hours later.
Just felt like every time my phone buzzed, it was a text from United saying your flight was delayed. You just get to the point where you're like, okay, the trip isn't fun anymore.
All of it coming at the worst time for passengers and airlines alike.
The demand was higher, the stakes were higher, and there are more people who are traveling, so it's harder to accommodate them on whatever flights are left.
If your flight is delayed or canceled last minute, try to rebook yourself using the airline's app or an airport kiosk. If you have airline lounge access, consider seeing an agent there. One silver lining, airlines are trying to cancel or delay flights in advance. So
keep checking your reservation. Just stay on top of it, because the earlier you spot a problem, the easier it is to deal with.
So we mentioned 1,700 flights canceled today so far, and here's the breakdown. Southwest Airlines, 11% of flights right now. JetBlue, 13%. SkyWest, you know, they cover the regionals, the commuters. They're at about 8%. United, 4%. Delta, 2%. And American, right now, just 1%. But it is early, and we're just getting started. I'm Tom Costello at Reagan National Airport here in Washington. It's snowy Washington. Back to you.
All right, our thanks to you, Tom. Thanks so much for that report. And now, as you just mentioned, snowy Washington, well, it may be later than usual, but the eastern part of the country altogether is finally getting its first real snowstorm of the season, with parts of Virginia receiving the largest snowfall in 3 years. It's time for Bill Cairns, of course, to join us. Hey, Bill.
This storm will, cause a lot of issues in a short period of time. And now we're getting into the peak of it in areas around Washington, D.C. So where Tom was, a lot of pavement was still very warm from yesterday when it was in the 60s. So some of the areas it's not going to stick, but eventually it's going to snow hard enough this morning that it will stick everywhere. Wilmington, Delaware could be one of those spots. We're expecting around maybe 3 to 5 inches in Wilmington, Delaware. So parts of the mid-Atlantic are going to get a significant first snow of the season. And yes, it's late for this, all the way into now January. So let's get to the maps. We do have the tornado watch. I have not heard any reports of any tornadoes or even any tornado warnings. The blue on this map shows you where the heavy snow is. It's starting to end in the mountains of North Carolina. And the really heavy snow now is just north of Richmond, up around Fredericksburg, and just south of D.C. And that's kind of the area, if we're going to get a foot of snow out of this, that's where it could happen as we go throughout the next 3 to 5 hours. That's how quickly it's going to fall. So winter storm warnings are everywhere in that reddish, maroonish type color. Winter weather advisories in white, and that's the heavy snow band is south of Philadelphia. Notice New York City, Hartford, Providence, Boston. This is not a snowstorm for you. So the snowfall totals, this is additional snowfall anywhere around 4 to 6 inches possible. Washington, D.C., that's on top of the 1 to 2 on the grass already. But from Fredericksburg to Salisbury, Maryland, Atlantic City, all the way through southern half of New Jersey, that's where some of the higher totals could happen. Notice we're still thinking an additional 4 to 8 inches in those areas. And what a weather whiplash this has been. Savannah actually said this last hour, all on her own without even knowing I was doing this. But yesterday, temperatures in the 70s and the 80s. Today's temperatures are coming crashing down in the 40s and the 50s. So for many areas, it'll feel much colder. This is how it should be, actually. I mean, it was 60 almost yesterday in New York City. Today, more like January with temperatures in the 30s. So, Savannah, you did that all on your own last hour. You called it weather whiplash.
There we go, Bill. I know what I'm talking about. I know how to read your mind now. We're a year and a half or so into this together.
Oh, that's scary.
All right, Bill Cairns, thank you so much. Great to see you. Now to new concerns over skyrocketing COVID infections. Nationwide, the country is averaging nearly 400,000 new infections every day. It's the highest number since the pandemic began. And as children head back to school this morning after the holiday break, a growing number of districts are temporarily switching to remote learning, while others, like here in New York City, are still holding classes in person, but with new safety measures. NBC's Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
Cases have really skyrocketed here in New York City. 20% of sanitation and police workers have called out sick. But even so, the doors to the schools are opening up to in-person learning amid strict new testing protocols. Nationwide, that's the case in a lot of school systems, some making last-minute changes which are leaving already concerned parents now confused. This morning, those back-to-school jitters now amplified by record COVID rates and a very mixed response from states. While schools in Atlanta, Cleveland, and Newark are opting to go remote temporarily, in New York, which saw over 85,000 cases on New Year's Eve, its highest one-day total ever, schools are still in person, with students and staff now required to submit a negative test before returning.
We can't close down our city every time there's a new variant. We can't allow our children to keep missing school.
L.A. adopting the same protocol, but in Detroit and Washington, D.C., schools are delaying their start until midweek to allow more time for testing. Massachusetts is bringing in the National Guard to hand out test kits to families. But with a massive testing backlog, will the results come in time? In Chicago, this video of an overflowing testing drop box for students and staff is raising concern. The Biden administration has vowed to help, insisting widespread testing and keeping schools open is the right way to go.
Our students belong in the classroom, and we can do it safely.
In Florida's Miami-Dade County, where 1 in 4 people are testing positive for the virus, there's no testing mandate in schools. Instead, staff and visitors must now wear masks, with state law banning the same mandate for students.
Mandating masks would help slow and stop the spread. But the governor made it impossible for school boards to do that.
It comes as the CDC has faced some pushback for its new guidelines that asymptomatic people with COVID can leave quarantine after 5 days rather than 10 without testing. Dr. Fauci now saying the CDC may update its guidance again.
Testing could be a part of that, and I think we're going to be hearing more about that in the next day or so from the CDC.
With the surge of overall cases has come a surge in pediatric cases as well. Nearly 200,000 pediatric cases in that week leading up to Christmas. That has also led to an increase in children being put in the hospital, the vast majority of them unvaccinated with underlying conditions. Back to you.
All right, Stephanie Goss, thank you so much. Let's now bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar for more. Dr. Azar, good morning. Happy New Year. Great to have you with us. So what should parents know this morning before sending their children off to school? Is there anything they can do to better protect their kids while in the classroom? Does this really just come down to vaccination?
Well, certainly vaccination is that probably most important layer of protection, Savannah, and that 5 to 11 group really needs to catch up with their older counterparts. Look, school systems are doing everything that they can. They're trying to be very flexible and nimble in terms of response to local rates. For example, my high schooler has to go remote today because they don't have enough staff, which means that teachers, janitorial staff, et cetera, have been infected with coronavirus. And my daughter, who's in middle school, is going to be in person for only half day. They're omitting the lunch time because that's when, of course, people are eating and taking their masks off. So all of these approaches, whether it's, a delayed opening, online schooling for a couple of days, testing, you can see, Savannah, what a patchwork it is across the country with different areas doing different things depending on their leadership and rates in their communities.
And much of the guidance even differing from the CDC, ultimately just leading to a lot of confusion. Now, Dr. Fauci recently suggested that testing might not be the best way to monitor COVID anymore. First, let's listen.
As you get further on and the infections become less severe, it is much more relevant to focus on the hospitalizations as opposed to the total number of cases.
So, Dr. Azar, what exactly does that mean? I mean, do you think hospitalization is where we should focus our attention? And is this because those cases seem to be less severe with this variant? What happens to those, though, who get long COVID but are not hospitalized? Just walk us through what exactly that meant.
You make a very good point, Savannah, and thank you for making it because, I think we forget, we do think that the end game is always, death as the worst outcome. But as we know, COVID-19 can lead to a lot of different complications, even if you do survive it. But I think what he's really getting to is the fact that we just honestly cannot really get an accurate case count at this point, given how transmissible it is. And also, given the number of home tests that people are doing, I think our daily estimate, as scary as this might sound, Savannah, is probably a significant underestimate of the true number of cases. So if we're speaking from just a sort of big picture epidemiological perspective, I do think that hospitalization rates and deaths are the main metric that people are going to be focusing on right now, really just to determine the virulence of the Omicron variant. I will just also say that analogous to flu counts, we actually don't base our annual flu numbers on lab-based flu positivity. It's really when people present to the hospital with influenza-like illness. So this isn't unprecedented, but the daily case counts are really an estimate. They're actually not even remotely a clear, hard and fast number that everyone would necessarily agree on.
Yeah, no, it's such a good point. I mean, so many people that I know that have had COVID in the last couple of weeks only knew because of a rapid they did at home, and then they just stayed there. They weren't reporting it anywhere. They weren't showing up at the doctor who was kind of, taking a tally of that. Now, finally, Doctor, Puerto Rico is experiencing the biggest surge of cases on the island actually since the pandemic began. But the island was also the most vaccinated territory in the U.S., including all 50 states. What does this tell us about vaccinations? What would you say to someone who's not vaccinated, that you don't want the message to just be that, it means you can still get it? Kind of walk us through that.
To me, I would say the message that we're getting loud and clear with this Omicron variant is that in spite of the fact that you may get a mild infection or a breakthrough infection, the vaccine is still a gift that keeps on giving. The latest data shows that if you've had 2 shots of the mRNA vaccine, your likelihood of being hospitalized is about 60% lower. And if you've gotten the booster, Savannah, it's approximately 80% lower. So this, if any message should be sent to Puerto Ricans and everyone around the world, is get your vaccine. And if you've been vaccinated, but you're more than 6 months out from the mRNA or more than 2 months out from your Johnson & Johnson, you need to get that booster.
All right, Dr. Natalie Azar, as always, thank you so much. Good to see you. Now, Congress is preparing to mark the anniversary of the deadly January 6th insurrection on Capitol Hill. Democratic leaders have plans for a solemn day of remembrance as the investigation into the attack continues, and with former President Trump planning to speak about it from Florida. NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Cake has it all covered for us from the Hill this morning. Hi, Garrett. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. I promise the Capitol is somewhere behind me in the snow, but we now know that those solemn remembrances will include remarks by the president at the Capitol on Thursday. Meanwhile, the efforts to understand exactly what happened here on the 6th and to prevent it from ever happening again still continue. But a year out, it's clear there is much more work to be done.
This morning, the insurrection investigation focusing ever tighter on what former President Trump did and did not do as the deadly January 6th attack unfolded.
The committee has firsthand testimony that President Trump was sitting in the dining room next to the Oval Office watching on television as the Capitol was assaulted. That is clearly a supreme dereliction of duty.
Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney also revealing multiple advisors asked Trump to intervene, including Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and the former president's daughter.
We have firsthand testimony that his daughter Ivanka went in at least twice to ask him to please stop this violence.
The bipartisan committee probing the actions of Mr. Trump and his allies in and out of government now seeking testimony from some congressional Republicans, along with White House aides and Stop the Steal activists. Since its creation last summer, the committee says it has interviewed more than 300 people and collected more than 35,000 pages of documents, including emails and text messages, while still battling the former president in court for more White House records. A spokesman for the former president telling NBC News the committee is, quote, obsessed with waging a political war against President Donald J. Trump. In the past year, 725 people have been charged with crimes related to the attack. The FBI says they're still looking for 350 more people they believe committed violence on that day. On Capitol Hill, a new police chief says reforms to how the Capitol Police collect and share intelligence and train officers have made the complex safer, but challenges remain.
What keeps you up at night now?
Right now, probably 200 officers below what we had pre-January 6th, and we're 400 below what we really need today.
Over the holiday break, Speaker Pelosi announced her plans to mark the anniversary of the attack Thursday with historical discussions, member reflections, and an evening prayer vigil at the Capitol. Former President Trump will be marking the anniversary, too, with a press conference at his Florida club. Two totally different viewpoints on the meaning of that day. Savannah?
Absolutely, and we know there will be lots to watch for throughout the week that I know you'll stay on. And yeah, you could have been part of our weather coverage a little bit earlier with that background.
Every reporter is a weather reporter. That's my belief.
Exactly. All right, Garrett. Thanks so much. Good to see you. Now, Prince Andrew was dealt a major setback in his efforts to block a lawsuit by Virginia Giuffre, who says he sexually assaulted her when she was 17. His lawyers requested to dismiss the lawsuit because they alleged Giuffre does not live in the U.S., but a judge rejected that argument. Giuffre says she was assaulted by the prince after being trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew denies the allegations and has said he has no recollection of ever meeting her. This all comes as a 2009 settlement between Epstein and Giuffre is scheduled for public release today. NBC News correspondent Kelly Kobaya joins us now from outside Buckingham Palace in London. Hi, Kelly. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Savannah. That's right. The lawyers for Prince Andrew are going to try to use that settlement, which has been sealed up until today, to argue that Prince Andrew cannot be sued civilly. The next few days absolutely crucial for the prince as his lawyers try to avoid what could be an ugly public civil trial over these allegations that Virginia Giuffre was forced to have sex with the prince. This morning, Prince Andrew back in the headlines. Pressure intensifying after the conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell last week, who's facing up to 65 years in prison for trafficking girls for Jeffrey Epstein. It comes as lawyers for the Queen's second son fight again to get a civil suit thrown out. Virginia Giuffre alleges she was forced to have sex with the prince 3 times in 2001 when she was 17. after being introduced to him at Maxwell's London home and dancing with him at a nightclub. Giuffre telling Today last week she believes the Maxwell verdict could lead to other revelations.
There's others who are involved that made this sex trafficking operation possible. Maxwell is just the beginning.
Prince Andrew has denied all of Giuffre's allegations, telling the BBC in 2019,
"I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady."
The prince has said he was at a pizza restaurant with daughter Princess Beatrice that night. In court documents, Giuffre's lawyers have asked for proof, including witnesses or the prince's official schedule, and for proof of the prince's assertion he's unable to sweat, in response to a claim from Giuffre he was sweating profusely the night she met him. Prince Andrew's lawyers pushing back tried twice last week to have the suit dismissed and lost. They'll try again in a hearing tomorrow, arguing in part that a 2009 settlement between Epstein and Giuffre, unsealed today, protects the royal from legal action. The big question now, will Maxwell have anything to say about Prince Andrew?
Well, clearly, if she's pursuing an appeal against the verdict, then she will probably keep her mouth shut. But when it comes to sentencing, we know she's essentially looking at the rest of her life in jail.
So that virtual hearing in New York over whether or not this case can go to trial happens tomorrow. Meantime, Prince Andrew hasn't been the public face of the royals for a very long time, since that interview in 2019 with the BBC. But he hasn't stepped back permanently, and there could be more pressure on Buckingham Palace to remove him officially and permanently from those royal duties, and also strip him from his remaining 9 military titles if, in fact, this goes forward, Savannah, and if it gets even uglier.
Absolutely. Something to watch there. Kelly, thank you so much. Let's now take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning. Matt Bodner is with us from Moscow this hour again. Hi, Matt.
Savannah, good morning. We'll start this hour off in Brazil, where President Bolsonaro says that he was admitted to a hospital early this morning and may potentially undergo surgery for a possible intestinal obstruction. Bolsonaro wrote on Twitter that he started to feel ill yesterday after eating lunch, and he actually said that this is the second time he's been hospitalized with these same symptoms. He attributes this all to a stab wound that he received at a 2018 campaign rally. We move along now to Hong Kong, where news outlet Citizen News says it will be shutting its doors on Tuesday in light of growing concerns over the safety of the independent press in Hong Kong following the imposition of a new national security law by Beijing back in 2020. Citizen News was the last remaining independent outlet in Hong Kong following the closure of Apple Daily back in June and Stand News just last week. We finished this hour at the nexus of streaming news and negative Eastern European stereotypes. Netflix is under fire for its portrayal of a Ukrainian character in the latest season of Emily in Paris. The character is shown to shoplift, fear deportation from France, and sport a questionable fashion sense. Ukraine's culture minister says he sent a letter to Netflix claiming the character is an insulting depiction of Ukrainians. Savannah?
All right, a lot of people have been talking about that show, so that's interesting. Matt, thank you so much. And there's much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A fourth COVID shot is being rolled out in Israel starting today. What that could mean for the future of the fight across the globe, up next. Welcome back. A Vancouver Canucks staffer finally got to thank the hockey fan who he says saved his life. During a game in October, a woman in the stands noticed a mole on Brian Hamilton's neck as he was moving equipment. She wrote a note on her phone, there you can see it, and pushed it up against the glass to warn him it could be cancerous. And it turns out she was right. Brian had the mole removed, and his doctors said in a few years it could have become life-threatening. The Vancouver hockey team posted this letter on Saturday to find the woman so Brian could thank her. And they did. They found her, 22-year-old Nadia Popovici, a recent college graduate who plans to attend medical school next year. They brought Nadia to the game Saturday night, where she received a standing ovation and a gift of $10,000 to help with med school. Wow, what an incredible story. Now back to the pandemic and the rapid spread of Omicron worldwide. One country is taking a different approach to control the variant. Starting today, Israel is now handing out a 4th dose of the COVID vaccine for anyone over 60 years old. It's the first country in the world to offer a second booster. And what's happening there may offer a glimpse of the future for the rest of the world, including here in the U.S. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, good morning. So Israel was one of the first countries actually to get the majority of its population vaccinated. So how will this new booster program work?
Savannah, good morning. The new booster program is going to work in stages. Starting today, all Israelis over 60 who got their 3rd dose more than 4 months ago are eligible to come to a vaccination center like this one and get that 4th dose. They join a growing list of Israelis who are eligible, people with weakened immune systems, care home patients, medical staff can all get the 4th dose. The obvious question, is it going to be rolled out to the entire population? And if past is precedent, then it probably will. So far, the 3rd dose rolled out like this the same way before going to everyone. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett didn't speak to that last night, but he said Israel will remain dynamic in the face of a fast-changing situation. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Israel will once again be pioneering the global vaccination effort. Omicron is not Delta. It's a different ballgame altogether. We must keep our eye on the ball, act swiftly and decisively if we want to continue engaging and working with an open country as much as possible throughout this pandemic.
So it's something of a race against time now. Omicron cases are rising quickly here, and the Israeli government trying to get that 4th dose out to as many people as possible before the peak. Savannah?
Now, Raf, Israel had imposed super strict travel restrictions in the face of Omicron. Where do those stand right now?
Yes, so those travel restrictions are easing somewhat, but they are still extremely tight. Right now, the U.S. is still on Israel's red list. That means no travel back and forth between Israel and the U.S. without special permission. Starting on Sunday, some fully vaccinated tourists from a few select countries are going to be allowed to come into Israel, but vast swaths of the world, the U.S., UK, Canada, Turkey are still off limits for Israeli travelers. Those restrictions have absolutely hammered the Israeli tourism industry, but the Israeli government says they did succeed in slowing down the arrival of Omicron. Savannah?
And aside from those restrictions and then this booster if you're over 60, what are the other ways that Israel's been trying to contain Omicron?
So one innovation they're trying, they are offering vaccinations to kids in schools. If parents sign a permission form, they can get their kids vaccinated in schools the same way some other vaccinations are offered. Israel has also been leaning heavily on this green pass, which you have on your cell phone, which you need to show to go into malls, into movie theaters, other public places to show that you've been fully vaccinated. Savannah?
All right, Raf Sanchez, thank you so much. Now, right now, a lot of us are trying to get our hands on a COVID test or go get tested. But which one should we get, a rapid test or a PCR test? And what happens if you don't have a choice? NBC's medical fellow, Dr. Akshay Sayal, breaks down the differences between the two.
As the Omicron variant surges across the U.S., so has the demand for at-home rapid COVID tests. But access and cost have been barriers for people looking to get their hands on them. And the new variant could be impacting the test's sensitivity.
They will be positive if you have a lot of virus, which usually means that you are infectious. So that's why I like to think of these tests not so much as medical diagnostic devices that can tell you if you've been infected with COVID, in the last couple of weeks, but rather these tools should be thought of more as contagiousness indicating tests, that if they're positive, you should certainly assume that they mean that you are very high risk for being contagious at that moment.
Experts say the tests sacrifice some accuracy in detecting virus for faster results than a traditional PCR test. But rapid tests can be a powerful tool for making quick decisions about travel, gatherings, or when to seek additional medical care. So which one is right for you? PCR tests are considered the gold standard, but they require special lab equipment to detect tiny pieces of the virus's genetic material. So you might have to wait days to get your results, especially when demand surges. A rapid test, on the other hand, is great at predicting if you are likely infectious and pose a risk to others. With rapid tests, you don't have to leave the house, and they can provide results in about 15 minutes. Unlike PCR tests, rapid tests detect molecules on the virus's surface, called antigens. While antigen tests may work best when someone is showing symptoms, they can still detect asymptomatic cases, but there's a slightly higher chance of getting a false negative. So a single negative antigen test doesn't necessarily mean you're in the clear.
If you're negative and you still say, I really don't feel well, the virus might not have migrated up into your nose yet. So you might have to actually do another test, and you might turn positive 2 days later instead of 1. But in general, assume right now that symptoms of COVID are COVID.
On the other hand, PCR tests are better at detecting the virus at any point, whether you're showing symptoms or not. But these tests can remain positive for up to 12 weeks, well after you are no longer contagious.
If you're asking the question, do I need to isolate right now? Can I go see my grandmother right now? These types of public health questions where the action is not about yourself, but really about the people around you. The PCR, unfortunately, is not accurate because it stays positive for so long. Whereas an antigen test, I would argue, is more accurate to answer the question, am I infectious? Do I need to isolate to keep those around me safe?
For both types of tests, access is still a major issue. Drugstore shelves have been wiped out of rapid tests amid a surge in holiday travel. But higher demand for PCR tests at pharmacies and clinics means you could be waiting days before you see a result.
Omicron will come crashing down over the next few weeks, I suspect. And so hopefully by the time we hit the next wave, whatever that might look like, we will have access to these tests.
The FDA announced that it's monitoring how well antigen tests work on the Omicron variant, but early data has found a possible decrease in sensitivity. Still, the findings are fairly new, and the FDA says it will continue to evaluate antigen test performance. For now, it's still a good idea to take a rapid test if you're worried you're sick, if you can get your hands on one.
All right, our thanks to Dr. Akshay Syal for breaking that all down for us. And coming up, a broadband battle shaping up between the federal government and top telecom companies. Why the rollout of 5G in America just got a little more turbulent. That story's up next. Welcome back. It's time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter too. Dominic Chu is back with us this hour. Hey, Dom.
Hey, Savannah. So let's talk Tesla first. They delivered more than 308,000 cars to customers in the fourth quarter of last year. That blew away analyst forecasts. The electric car maker shipping around 936,000 vehicles all of last year. That's up nearly 90% from 2020. The majority of those were the Model 3 sedan and Model Y SUVs. Now, that increase in production is even more impressive given the global computer chip shortage and supply chain issues that have plagued the auto industry overall over the course of the last year plus. Goldman Sachs joins other big banks in asking employees to work from home amid the current rise in COVID cases. Offices will remain open, but anyone who is eligible to work remotely is being encouraged to do so through January 18th. Goldman has already announced staff will be tested twice a week when they return, and all employees must have received a booster shot by February 1st. And Hollywood closes out 2021 with even more fireworks for Spider-Man: No Way Home. The Sony and Marvel flick topping the box office for the third straight week with around $53 million in receipts. That's according to ComScore. The film has already earned around $610 million in North America, which makes it 10th all-time in that market. Now, worldwide, it's made just under $1.4 billion. That's the 12th highest grossing film ever. Overall, the North American box office, Savannah, made around $4.5 billion last year. That's down 60% from pre-pandemic back in 2019. I don't know about you. I have not yet seen a movie in a theater, but I want to do so sometime soon, Savannah.
I totally agree with that. Now, of course, with this new spread and everything, I'm not sure, but I haven't in so long either, and I miss it. But that's great to hear that the industry is bouncing back in general.
Yes, and I just want that big, massively overpriced popcorn and big gulp and everything else.
I
And
know. See, I'm a
nice
sucker for the
blockbuster.
ices, which I think is like meant for children, but I still love them. All right, Dom.
I love them
thank
too.
you. Okay,
You got
great.
it.
Thanks so much. Now, the battle over the rollout of 5G is intensifying this morning after the airline industry said the new ground signal could potentially interfere with important safety instruments on planes. AT&T and Verizon are denying a request to postpone their 5G launches, but have agreed to temporarily weaken the signal around airports instead. NBC News correspondent Carrie Sanders joins us now from Fort Lauderdale Airport with more on this. Hi, Carrie. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Savannah. It's at airports like this where those 5G frequencies could interfere with a plane's radar altimeter, which is a critical piece of equipment for pilots, especially used on landings and even more so in inclement weather like we're seeing across the country today. But AT&T and Verizon spent billions of dollars for these frequencies, and it's only now that they and the FAA are trying to finally figure out how this will all begin.
With just 2 days until AT&T and Verizon go live with their 5G coverage, the FAA is getting very little cooperation from the major phone carriers. And overnight, the world's largest pilots union backed a top airline trade group calling to delay the rollout of 5G near certain airports. It comes after AT&T and Verizon declined a request from federal transportation officials to postpone the launch of their 5G signals for up to 2 weeks. The FAA has warned this next generation of cell service could interfere with some vital monitors pilots rely on to safely land planes in bad weather. This morning, the phone companies say they won't fully put their plans on hold, but for the next 6 months, they would agree to fade or decrease 5G signals around some airports. It's the same approach phone companies have used overseas in countries like France. AT&T and Verizon believe it will give the FAA and plane manufacturers time to determine if interference is simply theoretical or indeed real.
They're testing the airplanes about as rapidly as they can. All we need to do is give them time to find out which devices are susceptible.
The FAA has already said it may order pilots to land planes manually, starting this week when arriving at airports near 5G stations. Writing in a letter to the phone companies on New Year's Eve, failure to reach a solution by January 5th will force the U.S. aviation sector to take steps to protect the safety of the traveling public.
You're talking about hundreds of cancellations and thousands of people whose travel plans are disrupted.
More travel disruptions? The last thing those who have been facing major flight cancellations and delays say is needed. Now, there's hope both sides will answer the call for compromise.
So what's at stake here? Well, of course, this all comes down to money as well as safety. AT&T and Verizon spent upwards of $70 billion for the use of these frequencies in an auction with the federal government, and they feel the need to turn it on and get it going because T-Mobile already has its 5G operating in many parts of the country. They're on a different frequency that the federal government says does not appear to interfere with planes. Of course, AT&T and Verizon and the FAA are up against a deadline here because this was all supposed to begin in 2 days. Airlines say, well, turn on those frequencies, and that could cause problems for planes. Pilots would then have to space out their landings because they can't rely on their altimeters. And if they have to space out the landings, that slows down the whole process and will cost the airlines billions of dollars. Money.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Savannah?
It all comes down to money. But wow, can you even imagine something like that happening in the middle of all this other travel chaos? Ay, ay, ay. Lots to watch for. Carrie Sanders, thank you so much. Now, a Pennsylvania woman was 6 months pregnant when she learned that there was a tumor growing on the heart of her unborn child that could be fatal. Now, a pioneering operation saved the baby's life. NBC News' Kate Snow has more on this remarkable story.
Ryland Drinnen is just 5 months old, but when he gets older, his parents, David and Sam, look forward to telling him the incredible story.
Well, you can barely see it.
Yeah. Behind that scar on his chest.
What will you say, Sam?
That you went through so much
so little before you even knew what life was. And now you're helping the medical community in ways you never thought possible.
Yeah. When Sam was 26 weeks pregnant, doctors found a cancerous tumor growing on Ryland's tiny developing heart and suggested a groundbreaking operation that had only succeeded once before.
It was squishing the heart, and there was a ton of fluid already around the heart at that time. We're going to do the very best we can.
Dr. Daryl Cass led a team at the Cleveland Clinic that first had to operate on mom-to-be Sam, opening her uterus to reach little Ryland. Dr. Cass called on surgeon Dr. Hani Najam to remove the dangerous tumor.
My first response to him is that I've done these after birth. I could do this procedure, but you gotta have to get me to that fetus in the uterus so I could do something about it.
After 4 hours of surgery, the tumor was out, and Ryland back in place in what doctors call the best intensive care unit, the womb.
We talked every day. I would just tell him that everything's going to be okay, and I got you. We're going to get through this, and you're going to come out strong.
Ryland spent 10 more weeks growing and recovering inside mom. When Sam went into labor, they were nervous about whether his heart would pump on its own.
We're putting him in a ground one. I was his bypass machine, like keeping him alive.
Because he was attached to you,
Yes.
and your heart was doing all the work.
Yeah.
So the minute he comes out and they cut the umbilical cord,
He's on his own.
Yes.
what happened?
He screamed. He took over. He knew. He was like, it's my time to shine. Let's go.
Ryland's heart kept pumping.
You're so beautiful.
He's now a healthy infant who just celebrated his first Christmas, the best present his family could ask for.
It's a time of year when we think a lot about giving and appreciating family.
Oh, absolutely.
I just wonder how you guys are feeling now.
We're thankful for the doctors up at the clinic that took care of him and saved his life. We're thankful for our family for helping take care of me and him. Every time I see him, it's a feeling that you never thought you would have, knowing that he could have been gone, and that I get to hold him every day and just keep him as happy as I can.
Wow, what an amazing story. And yes, thank you to those doctors. Now, Ryland will be getting surgery in February to fix the bones in his chest cavity, and his parents are just grateful that their little boy is thriving. And Kate Snow, thank you so much for that report. Coming up, an icon of American television and entertainment is remembered this morning. The career, impact, and life of Betty White after this break. On the last day of 2021, America lost a national icon. Betty White died Friday, just 3 weeks shy of her 100th birthday. A legendary actor, her career spanned 8 decades, making it the longest-running career of any female TV entertainer. NBC News correspondent Harry Smith joins us now for a look back at her extraordinary life. Hi, Harry. Good morning.
Morning, Savannah. I'll tell you what, you think about that amazing sort of devilish smile she had, her impeccable comedic timing. She was indeed a national treasure.
Betty White always came to play.
I happen to be in the neighborhood. Doing what? Coming to see you.
There was never a role,
I don't know.
a talk show appearance,
Now we're up to Betty White there.
or even a game show where she didn't bring it.
Oh, I wouldn't touch that line. One who'd walk.
The sparkle in her eyes, her charm and wit,
So grateful.
and that smile
I've been smiling for 11 years.
that so often said, I know what you're thinking, and I may be thinking it too.
I didn't go to college. I just went into show business. Thank you, Rhoda.
Really, Betty White, 90 and naughty.
Cheers.
She alone could pull it off.
Coins.
Things you flip.
Many of us first got to know Betty White from her frequent appearances on game shows back in the day.
What are your plans for the summer, Betty?
Well, I'm going to do some... What did you have in mind, Al?
She was funny, clever. She brought with her an infectious energy, no matter the show.
Oh, Lou, you're so thoughtful.
But it was as Sue Ann Nivens on Mary Tyler Moore, where week after week she dazzled us as the spectacularly insincere talk show host.
Just cue me and then stick a sock in it. good news, people.
At manipulation, she made Machiavelli look like an amateur.
You mean Gloria made the mistake of not refrigerating the cream?
No, Gloria made the mistake of asking me to do it. Can't stand the heat, dear. Get out of my kitchen.
Then came the Golden Girls.
Thank you for being a friend.
We were the king and queen of the rumba.
Olay.
It takes a special kind of smarts
It goes something like this.
to play someone who is perpetually a step behind. That was Betty.
If you could have any two people in the world, living or dead, to your house for dinner, what would you eat?
You're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
The more we saw Betty White, the more we liked her. For instance, this interview with Al.
You look like you're enjoying yourself. You're still enjoying yourself.
Such fun. How can you not enjoy it?
Do you have any plans to slow down or retire?
Why? No.
Whatever it was she had, we wanted too. She made getting old look easy, effortless. How else to explain her appeal to multiple generations?
Ladies and gentlemen, Betty White.
When she hosted Saturday Night Live a decade ago, the show had its highest ratings in more than a year.
I'm 88 and a half years old, so it's great to be here for a number of reasons.
And the movie she made with Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds, The Proposal. If there were an Academy Award for scene stealing, she'd have won it.
Now, do you prefer being called Margaret or Satan's mistress? We've heard it both ways.
Would you do me a favor?
Well, maybe on my lunch hour.
Betty White had the rare ability to be naughty and nice at the same time.
What are you still doing here?
She truly was one of a kind.
Savannah, a national treasure, no question. So funny.
So funny. And by the way, from one of our own national treasures, that's how you get a line like, it takes a special kind of smart to play someone who's perpetually a step behind. Only Harry Smith can do something like that. Harry, thank you so much. Great tribute.
Thank you.
And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now. Thanks for being with us. Happy New Year. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.